What's up, movie fans? Guys, before we get into the main topic of today's video, do you guys mind if I actually sell out a little bit real quick? You see, me and my friends recently started a new YouTube channel that I want to quickly promote. It's called Cool Name, and we have been posting sketch comedy videos over there, and the channel kinda blew up. Like, no joke, it has nearly 5,000 subscribers, and we did not intend for it to blow up that much. We were just trying to make this silly little channel where we could post our silly little comedy sketches, and somehow it got a lot of attention, and we are just so proud of the videos that we have made over there so far and the little audience that we have amassed. So, if you're curious about checking out videos that are actually worth watching instead of seeing me talk into a camera for 45 minutes pretending to know what I'm talking about, please go over and check out Cool Name, link in the description. Okay, with all of that being said, let's get into the actual topic of today's video. We are going to be doing my third ever director filmography ranking. Today, we are going to be ranking every Edgar Wright movie. Edgar Wright is a director who I was always planning on ranking eventually, but full disclosure, the reason why I'm doing him this early is because a lot of my friends, including the ones I just promoted over at Cool Name, are massive Edgar Wright fans, and ever since I mentioned I was doing these rankings, they have been begging me to do Edgar Wright. With that being said, even though I was partially pressured into doing this ranking this early, I still really enjoyed doing this. Edgar Wright is another director who I knew practically nothing about going into this ranking. I had never seen a single one of his movies, but I am coming out of this ranking a huge fan. I love Edgar Wright's style. This is a man that just makes movies that have a certain rhythm to them. Like, his movies are very, very energetic, they're very fast-paced, they're very funny, and they just have this amazing editing that just really makes them memorable and makes them stand out. So yeah, I am now a huge Edgar Wright fan. Let's get into the ranking, starting with number 9, the worst Edgar Wright movie, A Fistful of Fingers. So this is actually Edgar Wright's first ever movie, and this is a very odd movie to include on this list because it's not a big budget film. This movie was made with only $15,000 in the 90s. It was an incredibly low budget production, and the movie was never really widely released. I actually had a very hard time tracking it down for this video. I had to resort to piracy. I mean sailing the high seas. I sailed the high seas. I didn't do any of that piracy stuff. That stuff is bad. Eventually, I was able to watch A Fistful of Fingers. This is a Western parody movie all about a cowboy with no name trying to track down and get revenge on the guy who killed his horse. And I am sorry to report that this is not a good movie. Like, sometimes when you watch low-budget films like this, they will end up being hidden gems. In the case of A Fistful of Fingers, no, this movie is not well made. It does not look good. It does not sound good. And holy crap, it is boring. Every scene in this movie goes on for a little bit too long. And I mean every single scene. It made it so that this movie, which is only an hour and 20 minutes long, kind of felt like it went on for 5 hours. Now, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It does have redeeming qualities. Mainly, I actually think the movie is occasionally kind of funny. Like, this film has a surprising amount of genuinely funny jokes that made me chuckle a little bit. So, it's clear that Edgar Wright was pretty good at absurdist comedy writing right from the start, but still, overall, I cannot rank this movie any higher than last place. It is easily Edgar Wright's worst film. Number 8, The Running Man, the newest Edgar Wright movie. Yeah, Edgar Wright's 2 worst movies are his very first movie and his newest movie, which I don't really know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's a thing. The Running Man came out late last year, and this movie got a lot of criticism from people. This is a dystopian movie based on a Stephen King book all about this future where America's economy is completely destroyed. Most of the citizens are living in poverty, and in order to make money, a lot of the citizens resort to signing on with this game show network, which makes them participate in game shows where if they win, they get a big sum of money, and if they lose, they die. And the main character of this movie, Ben Richards, played by Glenn Powell, signs on to the most dangerous game show of all, The Running Man, where you are essentially hunted by the entire country's population, with them being incentivized to hunt you by propaganda that makes you look like a terrible person. So that's what the movie's about, and I won't lie, for the first hour of the film, I actually really liked it. Like, I was outright kind of confused by a lot of the criticism that the movie had been getting, because I was really enjoying the first hour of the movie. I was invested in Ben Richards as a character. I was really invested in his journey to try and escape all of these people hunting him. There are a lot of very tense sequences in the first half of this movie. There's a sequence in a hotel early on in the movie that is awesome and is honestly kind of where the movie peaks. With that being said, the second half of this movie pretty much completely killed it. I did not like the second half of this movie, like, at all. Basically, what happens is Ben Richards takes this one woman named Amelia hostage in order to get away from the hunters, and suddenly, at that point, the movie focuses a lot on Amelia, and she has this whole character arc. At first, she thinks that the propaganda is real and Ben Richards is a terrible person, and then she kind of learns about his situation, how he's in poverty, how he's just trying to help his family, and she kind of has this character arc, and I thought that was interesting, but it happens too late in the movie. Like, this character, who I would argue is kind of the second most important character in the film, is introduced when the film has less than an hour left in its runtime, and so everything with her feels incredibly rushed. From there, without spoiling anything, the movie ends up on a plane. Like, all of the main characters end up on a plane during this big final battle of the film, and I just did not like anything that happened on that plane. The movie was very clearly trying to have these multiple different plot twists kind of layered on top of each other, and some of them did work. In particular, there was one involving Lee Pace's character that I thought was amazing. For the most part, I just thought that the movie was going way too far into plot twists. It was making everything way too convoluted, and by the time you got to the end of the movie, I just thought the conclusion that it came to was super rushed and not as satisfying as it should have been. So yeah, even though I started out liking The Running Man, by the end of it, I kind of thought this movie ended on an outright bad note. Number 7, I actually think there is a significant gap between The Running Man and this next movie. Next up, we have Last Night in Soho. This movie is kind of a black sheep in Edgar Wright's filmography because for the most part, Edgar Wright makes pretty light-hearted movies where you're meant to have a good time watching them. But in the case of Last Night in Soho, this is a horror movie, and not only is it a horror movie, it is a horror movie that explores some pretty dark themes. And I thought Last Night in Soho was a very interesting film. This entire movie is all about this one young woman named Eloise who moves to London to try and pursue her career of being a fashion designer. She's going to college in London, but she hates her roommate, she hates her dorm, so she moves out of her dorm and decides to move in to an apartment nearby, renting it from this very sweet old lady. But while she's in this apartment, she starts to realize that there's something very weird about this building, and she starts to have all of these weird supernatural visions of this woman from the past in the 1960s named Sandy, and she starts to basically see her entire life story every night, and she learns that some very dark, depressing stuff happened to this girl Sandy in the 1960s. And so the film basically centers around her trying to use these visions to investigate into this mystery in the modern day and figure out what happened to Sandy. And I think the movie's central mystery was really, really compelling. I was very invested in Eloise as a character. I thought she was an interesting protagonist, and this is a very well-directed movie. I would even go as far as to say I think this is one of Edgar Wright's best directed movies, where this entire movie just looks so visually striking, especially when you are in the 60s and everything is just so bright, colorful, and vibrant. I think the cinematography is absolutely amazing. The movie uses mirrors in very creative ways, and the movie is able to be very creepy and scary when it wants to be. This is another movie, kind of like The Running Man, that I think gets a little bit worse as it goes on, where by the time I got to the second half of this movie and you started to get answers to a lot of the mysteries that had been built up over the course of the film, I wasn't crazy about the actual answers that the movie gave. This is a movie that is kind of using its central mystery to explore some pretty dark themes about the abuse of women and how men kind of used women or still use women who are just starting out their careers. And I think that is a very interesting theme. but by the time you get to the end of the movie, I feel like a lot of the answers to the mysteries kind of make the way that the movie explores that theme a little bit distasteful and unsatisfying. Like, I'm trying to be very vague here because I don't want to spoil anything, but I just was not crazy about who the main villain of this movie ended up being. That's kind of my big criticism. Still, a very interesting movie. I just wasn't crazy about the direction that it went in. Number 6, The Sparks Brothers. This is actually a documentary. I haven't stumbled upon this before, but yes, Edgar Wright does have one documentary in his filmography, so I did have to include that on the list, and I thought that this was a very, very interesting documentary. This movie is all about Sparks, who are a two-person band that has been around since the 70s, and I honestly did not know anything about this band going into this movie. I had never even heard of them, but I came out of this movie actually really, really interested in them and fascinated by them. This movie does a very, very good job at telling their story in an interesting way that makes you kind of enthralled by these two people and all of the things that they've overcome, all of the people that they've influenced. Like, this was a very interesting, well-made documentary, and it is a documentary that is made with Edgar Wright's style, with his sense of humor, and so, yeah, just a very, very well-made documentary overall. Now, it's not one of my favorite movies on this list simply because I'm not as into documentaries as I am to narrative feature films, but still, I really do recommend that you check this out if you haven't before, because this is a very interesting film. Alright, number 5. Now we're getting into the really good ones. The World's End. This is the third and final installment in Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy. Now, if you haven't heard of the Cornetto trilogy, basically, these are 3 movies all made by Edgar Wright. Do not relate to each other at all story-wise, but all 3 of them are genre parody movies. All 3 of them star Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and all 3 of them at some point during their runtime feature a reference to Cornetto ice cream. So as a result, Edgar Wright and his fans have dubbed these 3 movies the Cornetto trilogy. And I really enjoyed all 3 of these movies. We're going to be getting into the other 2 in a minute. I thought that The World's End was a really, really funny movie, but it is my least favorite of the 3. This movie is basically about Simon Pegg playing this guy named Gary King, who is essentially a man who peaked in high school. He still, years later, just talks about his high school days. He only focuses on his high school friend group. He still wears the same exact clothes. He has the same exact car. This is a man who is stuck in the past, and this movie basically centers around him manipulating his old high school friend group, one of whom, Nick Frost, is a recovering alcoholic, into going back to their hometown on a pub crawl, and while they are there, they happen to discover that their hometown has been taken over by aliens. And that is the plot of The World's End. I really, really enjoyed this movie. Like I said, I thought this was a very funny movie, mainly because of Gary King. He is easily the funniest Simon Pegg character on this entire list, and he kind of carries this entire movie. Like, this entire movie is as funny as it is because of his character. The other thing that's interesting about The World's End is that this movie isn't just good from a comedy point of view. This movie also has some solid dramatic elements in it, which is actually a recurring theme throughout all three movies in the Cornetto trilogy, where this movie actually has some very interesting stuff to say about alcoholism, and the whole movie is kind of about Andy, played by Nick Frost, the recovering alcoholic, trying to convince Gary to give up his alcoholism and trying to help him. And I thought that theme was actually very well explored, and it was actually pretty emotional at certain points in this film. With that being said, the only reason why this is my least favorite of the Cornetto trilogy is because I thought the alien stuff in this movie didn't work for me as well as it should have. This is a genre parody movie where the parody elements kind of feel like an afterthought, and so I thought that was a little bit odd. I still enjoyed a lot of the alien stuff in this movie. I thought that the final act of the film, which basically revolves around an argument between Gary, Andy, and this weird alien supercomputer thing, was actually the best part of the movie, but for the most part, the alien stuff just wasn't as well integrated into the film as I would have liked for it to be. Still, a really fun movie. Number 4, the first movie in the Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead. This is also Edgar Wright's second movie overall. I thought Shaun of the Dead was just a very, very fun, delightful movie. This was a really funny parody movie that I really enjoyed, but what I wasn't really expecting about Shaun of the Dead is that this movie is also shockingly sad at certain points. This entire movie is about our main character, Shaun, played by Simon Pegg, who is kind of stuck in his life. He is a little bit of a loser, not as much as Gary King in The World's End, but still, and he's living with his roommate, Ed, who's played by Nick Frost, who is kind of a bum and is kind of holding him back. And because of all of this, at the start of the film, Simon Pegg's girlfriend actually breaks up with him. And then a zombie apocalypse starts, and the entire movie basically centers around Shaun trying to use this zombie apocalypse as a way of getting back with his girlfriend. And like I said, it's a very enjoyable comedy movie, but this movie also puts legitimate effort into getting you to care about its characters. And as a result, as you get to the end of the movie and characters start dying, this movie actually gets really, really sad. This is probably the saddest parody movie that I have ever seen, and I just was not expecting that, but it worked for me. Like, this silly parody movie puts more effort into getting you to care about its characters than most horror movies do, which I just think is very funny. I also just thought the zombie elements in this movie were way better integrated into the film than the alien elements in The World's End, which is why this movie is slightly better, in my opinion. I really enjoyed the final act of the film where all of the main characters are basically trapped in a pub and all of the zombies are trying to get in, and you have the "Don't Stop Me Now" scene, which in my opinion is probably one of the funniest scenes in any movie on this entire list. Alright, moving on to our top three. We're actually going to take a little bit of a break from the Cornetto trilogy here, because next up is Baby Driver. And this is kind of Edgar Wright's first serious movie. Like, it is the first movie that he made that isn't a comedy or a genre parody. And I really enjoyed Baby Driver for one major reason. This is Edgar Wright's directorial magnum opus. This is easily the best directed Edgar Wright movie. This film is about a getaway driver named Baby who is working for this criminal named Doc, and he is in debt to Doc, and at the start of this movie, he finally pays off his debt by doing this big heist, only to find out that Doc is still going to force him to work for him even after this heist. And so the movie centers around Baby trying to do one more job for Doc with the intention of leaving and fleeing after he completes this heist with the money that he gets from it and his new girlfriend. And I thought this entire film was just so exhilarating. Edgar Wright is a director who is able to make sequences that just have so much energy to them. And this entire movie is about a getaway driver. So as a result, you have a lot of car chases in this movie. And Edgar Wright just knows how to make sequences like that just so much fun. I'm not gonna lie, even though I loved this movie, this is a movie that kind of peaked in its opening scene. The opening car chase is easily the best part of the film, but the rest of the movie is still very, very exhilarating and very, very fun. This is also a movie that relies a lot on music, where the entire movie, Baby actually has this condition where he has this buzzing in his ear constantly. So to distract himself from that, he is constantly listening to music. And as a result, every scene in this movie is set to a different song. And I just think that makes it so much fun. It makes every scene in this movie kind of unique. It makes every scene kind of have its own unique energy and flavor. And I just really enjoyed that. I also just enjoyed the central story of this movie, which is all about Baby working with this group of people who are trying to pull off a heist. And the group of people that he's working with are very, very unhinged. And you're constantly wondering throughout this movie, when is this heist going to go wrong? Like, it is very clear that eventually this is all going to blow up. It's just a matter of how. The one big problem that I have with this movie is I do think there are some elements of its story that didn't work for me as much. I felt like Baby's girlfriend, who is a major character in this movie, kind of felt like an afterthought. Like, the movie doesn't really do a lot to explain her motivations to you or why she's into Baby to the point where she is willing to literally abandon her entire life to run away with him. I also thought that the character of Doc had a lot of very weird elements to his character, where throughout the entire movie, he seems like he only cares about his job, to the point where he literally threatens to kill Baby at one point in this movie for failing him, and then randomly they reveal in like the last 20 minutes of this movie that he actually does care about Baby, and that just felt very forced. Also, I'm not gonna lie, it makes it very hard to recommend this movie to anyone, that this movie stars not one, but two problematic people with Ansel Elgort, Kevin Spacey, but still, it is a really, really good movie, and it definitely did earn its place in the top 3 on this list. Alright, number 2, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Of all of the Edgar Wright movies, this was easily the one that I was most interested in checking out, just because everybody talks about this movie. Like, I have heard so much about this movie over the years, so I was very, very curious about what the fuss was about, and so I watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I did not expect what this movie ended up being at all. I knew the basic premise of this movie. I knew that it was about Scott Pilgrim trying to date a girl. All of her ex-boyfriends are very protective of her, so they try to kill Scott, and the movie is about Scott fighting them. That's what I knew about this movie. I didn't know that they all had superpowers. I didn't know that this world was an insane world where everybody has superpowers and people just fight each other randomly, and apparently murder is just socially acceptable because Scott Pilgrim kills multiple people in this movie and nobody cares. I didn't know I was watching a world where vegans have superpowers. Like, I did not know anything about any of that going into this movie. So when you get to the first fight with the first Evil X and they just come flying through the ceiling, I did not see that coming at all, but I was so into it. I was so into this movie's absurd logic and its absurd sense of humor that it does not try to explain to you at all. I just found this movie to be so much fun. I think it has easily the most memorable and fun characters out of any Edgar Wright movie, where I just loved all of the ridiculous personalities that are in this film. I loved Scott, I loved Ramona, I loved Knives, I loved the Evil X's. I thought the best one was Todd, the vegan one. That was the funniest part of the movie, in my opinion. And then the other thing that I really love about Scott Pilgrim is this is another movie that has a shockingly good story all about Scott Pilgrim kind of being a little bit of a jerk and a little bit of an unlikable protagonist. And then as the movie goes on, he kind of realizes how insufferable he is, and he grows as a person, and he kind of apologizes to the two people that he kind of wronged in this movie, Knives and Ramona. And yeah, I thought this movie had a shockingly heartfelt core to it. So yeah, I just loved Scott Pilgrim. With that being said, It's not my favorite Edgar Wright movie. Number 1, my favorite movie on this list is actually the middle child of the Cornetto trilogy, Hot Fuzz. This movie is all about this very, very serious cop played by Simon Pegg named Nicholas Angel, who is so good at his job in the big city that all of his superiors kind of hate him for making them look bad. So he gets sent to a small town where he's kind of out of the way, where he is paired up with this cop played by Nick Frost, Danny Butterman, who is just seriously incompetent, and he does not enjoy being in this small town at all. And then a series of gruesome murders start popping up in this town, which the townsfolk claims are just accidents. And so the movie centers around Simon Pegg and Nick Frost trying to investigate into these murders and figure out what is going on in this town. And in my opinion, this is the funniest movie in the Cornetto trilogy. That is the primary reason why I love Hot Fuzz so much. This entire movie was just right up my alley. I found every joke in this film to just be absolutely hilarious. I loved our main duo with Danny Butterman just being a very, very funny character, and then Nicholas Angel kind of being the straight man. I found the two of them to just be a lot of fun together. I loved the absurdity of the other cops in this town who just refuse to admit that there are murders going on in their small town, and they're just all saying, nah, this is an accident. Clearly an accident, even though this is the most gruesome thing I've ever seen. And I just thought that all of that was very, very funny. But the other thing that I loved about Hot Fuzz is that this movie has a genuinely great central mystery. At first, I thought this movie was going in a direction that was kind of predictable. Very early on in the movie, I was able to figure out, okay, this character is a red herring, this character is going to be the one behind everything. I figured it all out. This is a pretty predictable movie. And then this movie casually hit me with, I kid you not, one of the greatest plot twists that I have ever seen in any movie ever. The actual, twist of everything that was going on in this town, I did not see it coming at all, and I thought it was brilliantly executed. And after that twist happens, the last third of this movie becomes the most glorious yet insane third act that I have ever witnessed in a movie, where the final battle of this movie is just so absurd in all the right ways, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is a movie that just got better and better to me as it goes on, and I loved this film so much that when I finished it, I put it in my Letterboxd top 4, and it is still there. This is genuinely one of my favorite movies ever now. So, yeah, I am a huge fan of Hot Fuzz, and it is my favorite Edgar Wright movie. There you go. That's my ranking of every Edgar Wright film. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below, what is your favorite Edgar Wright movie? And if it's not a member of the Cornetto trilogy, tell me, what is your favorite entry in the Cornetto trilogy? Remember to check out Cool Names. Seriously, I'm very, very proud of this channel, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't. See ya, movie fans.